I'm Isabelle Hart, 28 years old, and I never imagined my mother's silence would cut deeper than any insult. Why don't you just disappear? Tessa spat across the dinner table, her voice sharp, her cheeks flushed with rage. The words pierced me, but it was Margot's reaction, arms crossed, a satisfied smirk, that shattered something irreversible. In that moment, years of playing second best were no longer a question, they were the answer. So I left. Before I tell you how that decision changed everything, let me take you back to where the unraveling began. Before Tessa entered our lives, my childhood was quiet, warm in places, even joyful. Margot, now 48, was once my biggest supporter, showing up to every school play, staying up late to help with science projects, brushing my hair and telling bedtime stories from her own childhood. We weren't perfect, but there was a thread of love that I believed was unbreakable. Everything shifted when I was 13. My parents' marriage collapsed after months of cold dinners and missed birthdays. One night, my father sat me down, voice trembling, and said he wouldn't be living with us anymore. The divorce was messy. I overheard late-night phone calls, saw papers strewn across the kitchen table, and felt our once safe home become something fractured. I was still adjusting to split weekends and echoing silences when Margot introduced Philip, quiet, kind-eyed, and successful. He seemed decent enough. But he didn't come alone. He brought his 20-year-old daughter, Tessa, just dropped out of her second college, and she needed a place to land. I was 15, still awkward, still grieving, but I tried. I helped her carry boxes into our guest room, gave her a tour of the town, even shared my favorite coffee shops. The shift was subtle at first. Margot suddenly remembered Tessa's shellfish allergy and changed my birthday dinner menu without asking. She interrupted my stories to ask Tessa how her day had gone. I told myself she was just trying to make Tessa feel welcome. Dad had moved to Riverton for work, and visits became rare. His absence left me without a witness as the dynamic in our home slowly tilted. Within months, Margot was calling Tessa our daughter, and me simply my daughter, a quiet grammatical knife that cut clean. One night, I found them sitting together on Tessa's bed, flipping through photo albums, laughing over stories I'd never heard. When I stood in the doorway, neither looked up. That night, I stared at the ceiling, sensing a shift I couldn't yet name, a slow erasure I was powerless to stop. College should have been my escape. I'd been accepted to my dream school with a partial scholarship and brought Margot the financial package with hope. I'll still need help with tuition, I said. She barely looked up. We just can't swing that right now. Maybe community college? 2 weeks later, she announced they were fully funding Tessa's third college attempt, this time, at an expensive private art school. I took out loans. Worked 20 hours at a cafe and another 15 in the design lab. Tessa got a brand new MacBook because art students need the best tools. I made Dean's List. Won a national design competition. Margot's praise? A quick, "That's nice, honey," before moving on. But when Tessa passed all her classes for the first time, Margot took the whole family to a restaurant I couldn't afford. Philip seemed uneasy sometimes. I'd catch him watching me with a crease in his brow when Margot gushed over Tessa's paintings while my award-winning portfolio went unnoticed. Once, he slipped me $300 after overhearing a call with my bank. "Your mom doesn't need to know," he whispered. But his silence the rest of the time? That was its own betrayal. Family holidays became minefields. Thanksgiving of junior year, I was placed at the kids' table while Tessa sat with the adults. When I quietly questioned it, Margot hissed, "Don't make a scene. Tessa doesn't know anyone here." Every time I tried to speak up, I was told I was too sensitive or jealous of any attention I give others. The worst? Tessa just needs more support than you do. My 21st birthday landed during finals. No call. No text. When I phoned that night, Margot sounded distracted. "Oh, is that today? We're planning Tessa's graduation party." Her graduation was 2 months away. I cried myself to sleep, clutching the teddy bear I hadn't touched in years. That silence, the absence of acknowledgement, was louder than any insult. But things were only just beginning to fall apart. After college, the pattern deepened. Margot and Philip helped Tessa with a down payment on her first apartment. Meanwhile, I lived with 3 roommates in a shoebox barely big enough for dreams. Margot carried a spare key to Tessa's place on her ring. She never asked for one to mine. Tessa's artwork filled their living room walls. My design awards collected dust in the back of my childhood closet. Every incident confirmed what I already knew: Margot didn't just overlook me. She preferred someone else's daughter over her own. If not for Jenna, I might have believed it was my fault. We met in a sophomore design class. She picked up on the dynamic almost immediately. "It's not okay how she treats you," Jenna said after a phone call where Margot canceled our plans last minute. Tessa had broken up with someone and needed her. Jenna's family welcomed me during holidays I couldn't stomach spending at home. Her parents asked about my career. They laughed at my jokes. They never made me feel like I was in the way. Through her, I met Eli, gentle, thoughtful, a psychology major who gave names to the wounds I'd never dared describe. Emotional neglect. Narcissistic family systems. He helped me see the patterns weren't accidental, they were embedded. "You're trying to earn love that should have been freely given," he told me once, after Margot forgot to mention a family vacation they'd taken with Tessa. His words stayed with me long after the relationship ended. He nudged me toward therapy. When I got my first full-time job and insurance, I finally went. Dr. Rowan, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing, offered what I didn't know I needed: a safe space to unravel. "You've been chasing scraps," she said during our 3rd session. "Trying to win what was supposed to be yours by birthright." My career became my anchor. Graphic design offered control, creativity, and measurable success. I stayed late, volunteered for big projects, and built a portfolio I was proud of. My boss, Elaine, saw what Margot never did. "You have a rare eye," she'd say, leaning over my mock-ups. When I landed my first major client independently, Elaine took me to lunch and toasted. "To the future," she said. That toast was more sincere than any I'd ever received at home. My community grew: Jenna's network, work friends, even neighbors who invited me to Sunday dinners. They became my chosen family. They didn't measure my worth against anyone. They just cared. Still, that old ache for Margot's approval didn't disappear. It lingered like a bruise. I'd fantasize about the day she'd finally see me. Apologize. Admit she was wrong. But reality always reminded me where I stood. Missed birthdays. Family group photos I wasn't in. Gifts I gave, still wrapped on the floor. Dad tried, in his way, from Riverton. He'd call. Send awkwardly chosen gifts. During a rare visit, he said, "Margot's always been intense. Try not to take it personally." But how could I not? Being second best to your mother isn't just personal, it's foundational. That Christmas, everything cracked. When I was little, Margot used to say Grandma Hart's pearls would be mine someday. She let me try them on. Said they'd be for my wedding. But that morning, I watched her hand the familiar blue box to Tessa. "These belonged to Isabelle's grandmother," she said, barely glancing at me, "but I want you to have them for your big day." Tessa had gotten engaged a few weeks prior. I sat there, frozen, breath shallow, as she fastened my grandmother's pearls around her neck. After everyone left, I asked Margot about it. Her answer: "Tessa's actually getting married, Isabelle. You're not even seeing anyone seriously." I felt like I was choking on air. "The pearls should be worn," she added. "Not locked away waiting for someday." 3 months later, I collapsed with abdominal pain and ended up in surgery for a ruptured appendix. Jenna rushed me to the hospital at 2 a.m. She called Margot while I was still under anesthesia. She said she'd come in the morning, Jenna told me when I woke up groggy and hurting. She couldn't miss Tessa's adult ballet recital. A recital? She skipped my surgery for a beginner ballet recital. That wound ran deeper than the one the surgeons stitched up. But it wasn't the last. The next betrayal came in the form of money. Margot called me one evening, her tone oddly cheerful. "Sweetheart, could you lend me $3,000? Tessa's car finally gave out. She needs a down payment for a new one. It was my entire emergency fund. But some part of me still believed if I gave enough, did enough, loved enough, maybe I'd finally be chosen. I wired the money that night. She promised to repay me in 3 months. A year later, when I brought it up gently, she looked confused. I thought that was a gift, she said, as if it had never been a question. Tessa really needed that car. The topic was never mentioned again. At a cousin's wedding, my aunt pulled me aside. I heard you might lose your job, she said with a concerned tilt of her head. Tessa mentioned it. Margot's worried. I hadn't told Tessa a thing. I'd confided in Margot during a hard week, one vulnerable phone call. She had turned my private fear into family gossip. Tessa didn't just inherit my place in the family. She inherited my mother's narrative about me. Worse, she wielded it. She borrowed my clothes without asking when I visited. Interrupted me mid-sentence during conversations. Made digs about my looks or job that Margot never corrected. It's so brave how you wear those jeans with your body type, she once said over dinner. Margot nodded, chewing, not even blinking. Then came Thanksgiving. I spent hours preparing my grandmother's cranberry relish, the one recipe that felt like mine. As I carried the crystal dish to the table, Tessa bumped my arm. The bowl shattered. I dropped to my knees, heart in my throat, as shards scattered across the floor. Margot laughed. Well, she said, winking at Tessa, canned cranberry sauce it is. Probably tastes better anyway. Philip flinched. He looked like he wanted to say something, but, as always, he didn't. Weeks later, after Tessa made another backhanded jab about my freelance work, Philip pulled me aside. You know I care about you, right, Isabelle, he said softly. I wish things were different. But wishes without action are just guilt in disguise. His silence made him part of the problem. I tried to set boundaries. Limited visits. Kept conversations surface level. Declined certain gatherings. But Margot used my distance against me. Why are you always so sensitive, she'd say. Tessa's just joking. You need to lighten up. The gaslighting was constant. Each slight dismissed. Each hurt turned back on me. I told myself I could endure it. Until the night I couldn't. It was a Tuesday in April. Margot invited me over for dinner. It's been too long, she said. I had just landed the biggest client of my freelance career, Lyric Systems, a major tech firm. It was a 6-figure project. I bought a bottle of champagne, rehearsed how I'd tell them. The house smelled like roast beef. Philip greeted me with his usual half-hug. For a moment, I let myself hope. Tessa arrived 20 minutes late, breezing in with a story about traffic. We lived 5 blocks apart. She announced she'd been promoted to assistant manager at the boutique where she worked part-time. It's basically like I run the place, she said. There were only 3 employees. Margot acted like Tessa had become CFO of a Fortune 500 company. My girl, she cried, leaping to hug her. She popped the champagne I'd brought for Tessa. Dinner revolved entirely around Tessa's title, her raise, her new authority. Every time I tried to pivot the conversation, Margot circled it back. But what are you going to wear on your first day in charge, Tessa? Finally, I spoke up. I actually have some news, too. I signed the Lyric Systems account today. I paused. A full rebrand. 6 figures. Silence. Then Margot said, "Oh, that's nice, honey." And turned right back to Tessa. Now, for that staff room, maybe sage green? Something in me broke. Do you even care? I asked. My voice was level, but my hands trembled. Do you ever care about anything in my life? Margot blinked, taken aback. Of course I care. Don't be dramatic. I just told you the biggest news of my career and you dismissed it in 5 seconds to talk about boutique paint colors. Tessa rolled her eyes. Jealous much, she said. Just because I'm successful now doesn't mean you get to ruin dinner. I laughed. Not joyfully. Successful? Tessa, I just landed a contract worth more than you'll make in the next 3 years. I'm not jealous. I'm exhausted. Exhausted from being ignored, dismissed, and forgotten. Margot sighed, exasperated. Here we go again. Always making everything about you, Isabelle. When has anything ever been about me? My mind raced, the pearls. The surgery. The money. The birthday she forgot. Philip stared at his plate. Still silent. Margot's voice sharpened. You've always been so needy. Tessa understands that family means support, without keeping score. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Then name one time you supported me. She couldn't. Instead, she said, I don't have to justify myself to you. This attitude is exactly why what, Mom? Why you always preferred her. Tessa shoved her chair back. This is pathetic. You're 28 and still crying about not being the favorite. She glared. Why don't you just disappear? I turned to Margot. Waiting. Begging for her to say something, to defend me. But she didn't. She just smirked. A smug, satisfied smirk. As if someone had finally said out loud what she always believed. That smirk was the knife. Philip stayed still. Tessa crossed her arms. Margot just looked at me. And I knew. I stood up. Grabbed my coat. And walked out. No one called after me. No one followed. As I pulled away, I saw them through the dining room window, already back to eating. My chair, empty. Like I'd never been there at all. But something inside me was different now. I wasn't just leaving a dinner. I was leaving the illusion. The drive home was a blur. Streetlights smeared through tears I couldn't hold back. I gripped the steering wheel like it was the only real thing left. My apartment felt like both a haven and a tomb. Safe from them, yes, but full of memories of who I'd been while still chasing their approval. I called Jenna. She answered on the first ring. They're never going to change, are they? I asked, my voice already cracked open. She was quiet for a moment. Then said gently, I think you've known the answer for a long time. She was right. The shock wasn't that Margot had chosen Tessa. It was that I had wasted so many years pretending she hadn't. I need to get away, I said, surprising myself. Not for a weekend. I need distance. Real distance. Without hesitating, Jenna offered her family's cabin in Silverbrook. It's yours for as long as you need it. By sunrise, I had a plan. My freelance business could travel. No pets. No plants. No reason to stay rooted in a place that only brought pain. Tessa's words echoed in my mind, why don't you just disappear? Maybe I would. Over the next 48 hours, I moved like someone on autopilot. Found a subletter. Set up mail forwarding. Packed my car with essentials. Sent clients an email, taking a short creative retreat, availability unchanged. I didn't tell anyone in my family where I was going. On day 2, my phone lit up. Margot. Not apologizing, just demanding. You're being childish. We need to talk about your behavior. No, I'm sorry. No recognition of the smirk. Just control disguised as concern. Philip texted once, your mother's upset. Please call her. No mention of his silence. Tessa, of course, said nothing. The 6-hour drive to Silverbrook felt like crossing into another version of reality. One where I wasn't constantly small to make others comfortable. The cabin sat quietly beneath a canopy of pines. Rustic. Peaceful. Remote. It had a wood-burning stove, patchy but passable Wi-Fi, and complete privacy. That first night, I sat on the porch and stared up at the stars. No city lights. No noise. Just silence. And in that silence, I felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. It was like taking off shoes that had always been too tight. I hadn't realized how much I was hurting until it stopped. The texts from Margot shifted from scolding to performative worry. "We're so concerned. If you're trying to punish me, it's working." I replied only to confirm I was alive. Nothing more. No openings. No explanations. After a week, I built a rhythm. Mornings were for lyric systems, my biggest client yet. Afternoons for long hikes or wandering into the town library. I found a therapist who offered virtual sessions, Dr. Rowan. We met twice a week. "You've been breathing in poison for so long," she said. "You forgot what clean air feels like." I started journaling. At first, the words poured out like blood from a reopened wound. Birthdays missed. Achievements ignored. Years of trying to prove I mattered. Some days, I cried while writing. Other days, I felt nothing at all, just blankness. Dr. Rowan told me numbness was part of detoxing too. Then something shifted. I started sketching again, not for work, not for a client, just for myself. I baked bread for the first time in years. Painted watercolors of the forest behind the cabin. I ran trails I used to be too afraid to walk. My body grew stronger. So did my voice. At the library, I met Grace, an 84-year-old former professor. She invited me to her weekly coffee circle. "You remind me of myself at your age," she said, sipping slowly. "Running away to finally find yourself." "I'm not running," I replied. "I'm disappearing." She smiled. "My dear, you're not disappearing. You're finally becoming visible." Her words stayed with me. And they were right. Without Margot's shadow, my creativity exploded. I finished the Lyric Systems campaign ahead of schedule. They called my work visionary. They asked for an extension contract. 2 more clients followed. I doubled my rates. What I once thought was luck, I now recognized as talent. The need for Margot's praise faded. In its place, I began building something new. And something real. The town embraced me. Besides Grace, I met Sarah at the bookstore. Greg at the farmer's market. The Hendersons at the diner where I sometimes worked on my laptop. They knew nothing of Margot or Tessa. They just knew me. And they liked what they saw. The girl who disappeared wasn't lost. She had just needed silence to hear herself. 1 month in Silverbrook passed like a season of shedding. My inbox filled with praise from clients. My designs were sharper. My thinking clearer. Lyric Systems called my work revolutionary. And for once, I believed it. Margot's texts grew more desperate. "How could you do this to me? After everything I sacrificed for you." But the guilt that used to tighten around my ribs like a vice was gone. I began drafting a boundary email. No more triangulation with Tessa. No more comparisons. Contact would be limited, conditional, and on my terms. After 6 weeks, Dad drove up from Riverton. We hiked. Cooked together. Talked like we hadn't in years. "I failed you," he said quietly as we sat near the fire. "I saw how Margot treated you, but I thought staying out of it would keep the peace. I was wrong." His honesty let something soften between us. It wasn't a repair. But it was a beginning. As spring returned to Silverbrook, so did I. To myself. The forest bloomed. And so did I. My morning pages became more than pain dumps. They carried ideas. Gratitude. A future. What if she just couldn't love both of us? I wrote one morning. What if her limitations weren't my failure? I started running again. Sketching without purpose. Dancing barefoot in the cabin kitchen. And not caring how I looked doing it. Grace said I was glowing. "You're healing," she smiled. "No one sees it first in the mirror." The offer came out of nowhere. An art director from a past collaboration reached out. A major publishing house needed a creative lead. The contract was prestigious. The pay was transformative. I accepted it from the cabin porch, golden light touching the trees. I didn't tell anyone from my family. Because I no longer needed their applause to know I was enough. In therapy, Dr. Rowan helped me prepare for the return. What does a healthy relationship with your family look like? Do you want one? I didn't want a clean break. That would make their dysfunction the author of my choices. I wanted boundaries, not walls. I edited my letter to Margot again and again. Finally, I sent it. Clear. Firm. If we are to have a relationship, here are my terms. Acknowledgement of past favoritism. No more comparing me to Tessa. Family dinners only on holidays, and only if respect is maintained. Her reply was cautious. Uncertain. But not combative. 2 days later, I agreed to meet her in a downtown cafe. Neutral territory. Public. Safe. I arrived early. Chose a quiet table. Ordered chamomile tea. She walked in 15 minutes late. Hair undone. Eyes searching. You look different, she said. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. She talked about traffic. The weather. The coffee shop's new menu. Anything but the dinner. Anything but the smirk. Finally, she leaned forward. Everyone's been so worried about you disappearing. Tessa thought you had some kind of breakdown. There it was. Deflection. Blame. Silencing through diagnosis. I didn't have a breakdown, I said. I needed space after being treated as invisible for too long. She flushed. You always twist everything. I never favored Tessa. She just needed more support. I breathed slowly. I'd like to share some specific examples. Then I did. The pearls. The surgery. The car money. The birthday she forgot. With each story, her defenses wavered. I was just trying to make Tessa feel welcome, she murmured. And I wasn't? I asked. Did you ever stop to consider how it felt to be me? She looked down. When she looked back up, her eyes were wet. Not the manipulative tears I'd seen before. But something closer to real. It hurt to look at you, she said softly. You reminded me of your father. The way you laugh. The way you argue. My breath caught. So that's what it had been. A ghost in my face. A wound she couldn't face. So you chose someone easier, I whispered. She didn't remind you of your failures. Before she could respond, the bell above the door chimed. Tessa. Of course. She walked straight to our table. You couldn't even do this without dragging me into it? This is a private conversation, I said. And you weren't invited. She scoffed. I'm your sister. You don't get to dictate terms. I get to dictate my boundaries, I said calmly. And this conversation isn't about you. Tessa stared at me like I was a stranger. Because in that moment, I was. The old me would have apologized. Not anymore. If you want to talk about our relationship another day, I'm open to that, I told her. But not today. She sputtered. Then left. Margot stared after her. You've never spoken to her like that. I've never known my worth like this before. We didn't reconcile. But we spoke. Real words. Real consequences. We agreed on tentative monthly dinners, just the two of us. Any return to old habits? I'd leave. No warnings. No debates. Later that week, I met Philip at the same cafe. He looked like a man walking into court. I should have said something, he confessed. All those times, when she cut you down. When Tessa mocked you. I told myself it wasn't my place. Your silence was, I said gently. It always was. He nodded. Didn't argue. Didn't excuse. Just said, how do we fix it? I gave him the same terms. Limited contact. Respect. Action, not apology. And then, I moved. Found an apartment across the city, near the lake. Far enough to breathe. Close enough to choose. Thanksgiving came. Dinner at their house. Tense at first. Tessa tested me with her usual remarks. I responded calmly. That was dismissive, Tessa. I was speaking, please don't interrupt. Margot watched, unsure. But she tried. Philip stepped in when needed. Not perfect. But better. And for the first time, I wasn't a ghost at the table. I was me. Fully. 1 year after that dinner, the one where I finally walked out, everything has changed. Lyric Systems launched to industry acclaim, and with it, my design studio transformed into something real. What started as just me is now a boutique firm with 2 junior designers, a project manager, and a wait list of clients. But the most meaningful transformation wasn't professional. It was internal. I no longer live by the echo of Margot's approval. The craving that once shaped every decision, every compromise, every silence, has gone quiet. Through continued therapy, I built an internal compass that doesn't swing toward guilt or longing. It points inward now. Toward clarity. Toward peace. And toward truth. I met Luke on a children's book project, a soft-spoken illustrator with kind eyes and a voice that steadied me. Our relationship is unlike anything I've known. No performance. No anxiety about being too much or not enough. Just safety. Just presence. One evening while we were cooking, he caught me smiling. "What is it?" he asked. "I don't know," I said. "I just feel safe." He dried his hands on a towel and looked at me. "You know exactly who you are," he said. "And it's beautiful to witness." My monthly dinners with Margot continue. Sometimes they're awkward. Sometimes they're strained. She still slips. Makes comparisons. Forgets details that matter. But I name the behavior. Without anger. Without hope that she'll change overnight. And, surprisingly, she listens. Last month, she asked if I'd help redesign her home office. She called me a professional. The word landed differently. It was the first time she'd seen me as something more than a daughter to be disappointed in. Tessa and I keep a respectful distance. At family events, she still tests boundaries. But I don't play anymore. At Christmas, she handed me a glass of wine and said, "I guess we ended up okay, even if it wasn't the same path." Not an apology. But an acknowledgement. And sometimes, that's enough. Philip reaches out more too. He invites me to lunch. Talks about his woodworking. Asks about my clients. During one lunch, he said, "I always knew you had something in you. I just didn't know how to fight for it." I didn't absolve him. But I heard him. And sometimes, that's enough too. My relationship with Dad has softened in ways I never thought possible. We video chat every month. He visited 3 times this year. Last time, he brought a box from my childhood, drawings, old report cards, Father's Day cards I made in 2nd grade. "I always saw you," he said as we sifted through the memories. Even when I wasn't there like I should have been. And perhaps the most unexpected healing came through the group therapy I joined, adult children of emotionally neglectful parents. I met Amanda there. She reminded me of myself 5 years ago, angry, confused, still hoping. We meet for coffee now. She asked me, "How did you stop needing your mother's approval?" I didn't give her a perfect answer. There isn't one. But I told her this: you stop needing it when you stop believing their version of you is the truth. You stop needing it when you build something better than their silence, your voice. Disappearing was never about running away. It was about stepping out of the spotlight I never asked for, and walking into the light I created myself. Forgiveness, I've learned, doesn't mean pretending it didn't hurt. It means stopping the cycle. It means saying, this is where the pain ends. This is where I begin. My studio overlooks the city now. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Bookshelves. Sketches. A quiet hum of creation. Sometimes I stare out at the skyline and remember that night, the smirk, the insult, the pain. Why don't you just disappear? And I smile. Because I did. And when I returned, I wasn't the same girl begging to be seen. I was a woman who had finally seen herself. Maybe you've had to walk away from someone you loved. A parent. A partner. A friend. Maybe you're standing at the edge of your own unraveling, wondering if disappearing means giving up. It doesn't. Sometimes disappearing is the bravest thing you can do. Because it's not about vanishing. It's about reappearing, whole. Clear. Unapologetically yourself. And that is how I found my way home. Not to them. But to me.